Hello everyone and welcome to Avantika Designeering series or ADS as we like to call it. Every week on Wednesday, we feature design and technology leaders who share their professional journey, their thoughts on their domain of work, and designeering where the world of design and engineering meet. Make sure you follow us on social media Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And with that, let's continue with your show.
As humans, we all care about money. Not unusual for a person to want to check their bank account at least once a week. And it's self explainable why. We live in a financially driven world and many things revolve around our account balance. Therefore, even if we like it or not, we are constantly in need to make financial decisions. When using online banking services to pay for bills or to check the account, or when accessing financial services on our mobile phones, we always get in touch with user experience design. That being said, a quality of design can ease the way people handle their finances, can reduce the time needed to access certain features, and can lead to a more pleasant experience overall. And that's why in this episode, we interact with Nivedita Chandra, Head of User Experience at Deutsche Bank. She has over a decade and a half of professional experience in the domains covering design, business, and technology. And that's why on our journey of discovering designeering, we talked to her in our special episode of World Bank Day. Hello, Nivedita. Welcome to Avantika Designeering series. It's a pleasure to host you on our show today.
Thank you so much, Rohit. It's a pleasure to be here.
Super. So, to start with our icebreaker, Nivedita, as a designer, we are constantly experimenting with so many tools and processes in an attempt to find the one that works best for us. And after a great deal of experimentation, we discover the perfect design workflow. The question that I have for you, my first one, how did you discover your workflow?
That's actually a very interesting question, and I think you are bang on when you say that it takes some time for any designer to discover the perfect design process. And I think from my experience, I have mostly been associated with technology design for enterprise products. So to just let you know, see, when I started looking the normal way, right? You go to all these websites, you go to conferences, you go to these webinars and try to get all the aspects from there and try to create a process that might work. But most of the inputs and guidelines that I would get aligned more with B2C kind of product. And that was not something which I was working on then and even now. So I think it took me a good like a year or more, and that was in my previous organization. So we were just starting the UX practice, and we were looking for the processes which would work our development methodologies, which could actually get incorporated with the existing structures without really affecting the outputs and deliverables too much. So that's where we decided with this three-step process. So generally from that point onwards, this is what I try to incorporate in all similar projects. But of course, depending on the product, the process might change. But what I do and what I want my team to do is generally break the whole process into three steps. So it's always discover, design, and execute, which is the basis for any UX research as such, but have very clear demarcations. And this the discover would be steps like we always start with a experience canvas workshop. So this was something which was made popular by Atlassian when they published one of their initial studies and initial learnings when they were creating their design process. They published something called an experience canvas workshop, and this is where you have all the stakeholders in one room. It is a very timed exercise, if I may say so, just 60 to 90 minutes at the most. And the idea is to have all of them answer a set of questions, just to make sure that at the end of it, all the stakeholders are at the same place when it comes to the design outcomes. So we have questions like, who are the comparators? What do you plan to achieve from this? What are the most important features? What are the ones which will be there in MVP? What are the proposed solutions? And this seems like a very bland exercise, but I've realized when you have everyone in the same room, the insights and the perspectives that you get actually gives you a very good idea of the design outcome. Also, it is one way of making everyone aware of the design process, because as I said, in my previous organization we were just starting up. So not everyone, starting from the engineering teams, product teams, management, were aware of what design process is. For them, the final output was always the visual design. So this also is an exercise in evangelizing, letting them know about the efforts that go into design. So that would be part of the discover phase. Then we have market research, creating profiles, personas. Then once after we have the final output of discover, we move on to design. Design would be, see, you have use cases, features, what are the journey maps, and so on and so forth, and all of these phases would have a very well defined document coming out of it, right? So this is for the whole team to see and analyze and contribute to. And only after design we move to execute. So execute is the final prototypes. We have wireframes, we work on the navigations, the information architecture, and the final prototypes. So I just make sure that my team is very clear about these three steps, and that there are no overlaps. So we are not allowed to pick up a pencil, start from the sketch at any point of time. The first step always has to be the experience canvas workshop, and then we move forward. So this is something which has worked really well for me. The tools and processes inside, they obviously change depending on the product.
Wow, that's interesting. So Nivedita, working from, how did you discover your workflow to coming to your life? From a software designer to head of user experience, global transaction banking chief digital officer at Deutsche Bank. You've also been an entrepreneur multiple times. How did all of these transition over the period of your professional life take place? Can you run us
Hmm.
through that?
Yeah, sure. It's been a long journey, So yeah, I started working more than 14 years back. So I graduated in 2006 and have been working ever since. So I think that was the time when engineering was the most safest. I mean, it was the safest profession. It was either engineering or medical, and I'm so happy to see that things are changing, and it's not going to be the same for you guys and the generation after that. But yeah, so engineering was the default option for me. I was not never interested in biology, so I did that. Also, I think I don't have any regrets, and I don't have anyone to blame, because I never realized that I could take up design as a full-time profession. For me, it was always there, it was always part of my life. I loved drawing and doodling and everything creative, but I never really realized that I could, make money out of it. I could make it as my full-time profession. So yeah, I did engineering. The initial part of my career was core software engineering, development, QA, testing, and I spent the initial few years there. I think one good thing that I always did, and that's what I tell to all the new grads in my team also. If you have a passion, if you have an interest, just keep pursuing it. Don't let your job take over your life completely. So that was something which worked for me. I was always doing graphic designing as my side project. So as all of us start, right, I started taking up assignments for logos and branding and collaterals, a lot of freelance work, using the online websites, and also friends. So once you start doing, you create a network out of it. So I was always doing that. And in so one of my, I think it was my second or third job, so all my bosses, they knew that I was very interested in that, and also I had worked for some of their friends in setting up their startups and designing the right journeys for them. So they knew what I was capable of. So yeah, I think uh, a new team was being created for specifically for user experience, and it was the first time they were experimenting with something like that. And they asked me if I wanted to be a part of it and start it up. So I think, yeah, that was the best twist in my career, because till that time I was working on my day job till till the evening, whatever, 6 7, and then at night I would take up all the freelance assignments for design, because that was something which really gave me a kick, which kept me motivated. And then I would work on those side projects till maybe 2 2:33 in the morning. So when this opportunity came up, I didn't even think twice about it, and I took it up. That was an amazing time. I was part of setting up a new team for user experience, so that requires another level of effort altogether, because it's not just about UX. Then it's about telling the people all about design, telling how design is gonna impact a business, how we are actually gonna impact the revenue numbers using designs, and how we are gonna delight the customers, to setting up the processes, the frameworks, the guidelines, hiring people. And that was a really, enriching experience for me. So that's where my journey as a full-time designer started. Actually, in my career I spent almost 10 years in Bangalore. uh, in between, like 3 4 years, I moved to Delhi for some time and came back to Bangalore. Deutsche Bank happened just a couple of years ago, so I was like really happy in Bangalore, a nice peaceful place, uh, enjoying my career there, and everything seems to be working fine. So that's where my discussions with my current boss in Deutsche Bank started, and it seemed like a very challenging role to take, because the digital team, the chief digital office for GDB Digital, was a new team that he was working on, and he so this is something where we create new products, new digital products for the bank. Again, a similar kind of experience where you have to uh, make the people understand how actually design is important for banking as well. And I was part of corporate banking, so it was again a little different challenge, because people seem to understand how design works for a retail bank, how design is important for your retail business. And it's not like people there didn't know about the concept of design. Everyone was using Apple and all the websites, and so they knew that design is something really cool. But the major challenge again there was to make them understand that it's going to drive real numbers. So as long as you can't associate design with actual business numbers, uh, that's where you just lose the focus of the stakeholders. So again, that happened, and I had to move to Mumbai because of that. It has been an amazing journey in Deutsche Bank so far. A lot of different teams that I got to work with, and yeah, some experience with corporate retail as well, a different business, a different learning altogether. So yeah, that has been my journey. I think, yeah, I have been speaking for a long time now. Yeah, that's has been my journey so far.
Yeah, that really sounded interesting. In fact, one of the things that I caught hold of, Nivedita, while you were speaking, that you made your transition from the technology mindset to a business mindset to a design mindset, and somewhere you also kept blending all of these mindsets and skill sets. The question that I have is, what is your secret sauce to blending this versatility? How do you keep switching on and off the design part in your brain, the business part in your brain, the technology part in your brain? How do you connect all of these dots?
That's actually a good, I mean, very interesting observation. I never really thought of myself like that. So, yeah, thanks for giving me that idea. Um, I think, see, Rohit, the first thing I think that worked really well in my favor was because I came from an engineering background. And if you see my career, I have always been in technology design. So it became really helpful for me to understand technology whenever I'm working on a new product, and try to use design. in accordance with the underlying technology. So whenever it's a new product, I believe as a designer, all of us should be aware of what are the underlying technologies, right? What are the DB structures that you're using? What is the middleware? Are you using microservices, APIs? So basis that, you can actually design the most efficient experiences for your users. Although I always felt that I didn't go to a design school, and I think that's going to be my lifelong regret. But having said that, I think engineering also helped me in that aspect, because I was pretty comfortable with technology before I moved to design. So I had to put in a lot of effort to understand design, but technology was something that came a little naturally because of my education and also the initial experience. Uh, Coming to business, definitely, I think that took some time, because when we start as young designers, we only see the last deliverable, and I think it's true for engineers as well. When we start as new engineers also, we just see that, like, our small little piece of code, and the final output on the product for it. Associating it with business, I think that's the last piece in the jigsaw that we need to ace, because when you're working with an organization, all our efforts are towards driving a business, and that is the bigger picture. I think all the leaders in an organization should be giving the people, the engineers, the designers. And now I firmly believe that if your design cannot really impact your business, your revenues, then I don't think you are actually using design to its fullest potential, especially for the products that I've been working on uh, at VMware or at Deutsche. These are meant for a specific set of users, and are the core businesses of the organization. So the design only has to enable business, just like engineering or like engineers have to enable the business. So I think it's very important, and I try to have that in my team as well. I try to give the bigger picture. What Why are you doing something that you're doing? So the key is always to start with why. If there is a new product, why are we doing it? How is going to impact our business? Is it going to affect the users, and why we are doing it? So it's good to give that clarity to everyone involved before we start any of our efforts.
Hey, did you know Deutsche Bank is launching a global brand campaign that uses client stories to show its positive impact in action? These stories are told through films featuring clients and colleagues from across the bank, demonstrating how Deutsche Bank supports clients to achieve their plans and ambitions. Wow, that's interesting in terms of how do you connect these multiple domains and dots. In fact, one of the interesting thing is that you are also a parallel entrepreneur with Monkey Baby. How did you come up with this idea, and why this unique name called as Monkey Baby?
Yeah. So Monkey Baby is actually a business which is on pause right now. I need to start working on it. I'm doing some prep work and plan to launch it again. So why Monkey Baby? Okay. So this was something which I started after my daughter was born, and I was obviously on my maternity leave, and wanted to do something new. I think this stuck because when I went out shopping, so Monkey Baby basically, I designed some fun, quirky T-shirts for babies. So basically, it was just onesies and T-shirts with some fun text on it. The idea came because whenever I went out shopping for babies, it always used to be like super cute, all kind of stuff. So for girls, you'll have like butterflies and teddies and pinks, and definitely very cute. But it was never quirky, and that's the kind of clothes that I always like to wear. So there were some brands who were doing really hilarious stuff. So I mean, if you see a baby wearing a onesie and it says any like Bollywood dialogue, it's like "Tu janta nahi mera baap kaun hai," something like that, and a 3 month old baby is wearing a onesie like that. I don't know. It always makes me laugh. It just breaks me up. So I wanted to start doing something like that, which is like more affordable, because some of the bigger brands were doing really nice work, but it was a little on the higher side. And so I started experimenting with that. We got some t-shirts and designed on it, and I sold it on the website and Amazon. The name Monkey Baby, yeah, that's because I used to call my daughter Monkey Baby. She was born, she didn't have any hair, a hairline just like that of a monkey. So I used to call her Monkey Baby, and this was a dedication to her. So even now, I mean, she doesn't understand the business, of course, much, but she knows that I have a business like Monkey Baby, and she wants me to start on it. And like every night, she asks me after the storytelling session, it's like, "Mama, Monkey Baby, we will start Monkey Baby again." So she thinks it's her business. Yeah, that's where the name came from. I need to start working on it again. Yeah.
Wow, we have a young budding entrepreneur in making, and that's solid inspiration right at the start. So moving from your journey to your organization in the space that you operate in fact, working on financial products that affect millions of users every day gives a real sense of scale and gravity to your work. Now, it's definitely exciting, but at the same time daunting as well. Now, my question is, how does one design for fintech different from the other products or services which are available out there?
Yeah, it's definitely humbling because the scale is completely different. So let me answer this from a banking perspective, which applies more to my area of interest and career. Because there are major differences in design when it comes to designing for fintech versus designing for bank. So I'll just speak from my experience, and I hope you're able to get some insights out of it. Uh, so, in simple words, you need to understand that for most of the banking platforms, the business success does not depend on the user's level of engagement. Uh, so, for example, for say a website like an Amazon or Flipkart, the design intent is to make the user spend more and more time on the website, right? The more time the user spends, the higher is the probability of them making a purchase. So there, the designers would keep the users engaged with, say, recommendations and offers and so on, just to make them stay on the website for more time. But on the other hand, for a banking platform, the user's aim is to complete a task. It might be to be more productive and more efficient. It could be like a bank's client in case of, say, an online banking, or it could be an internal employee when I'm working for, say, a trading app for our trade teams. So it could be either, but the ambition for them is always to be more efficient. So we need to ensure that at any point of time, the user has access, one, and the user has control, two. So they should have access to all the information they need to complete the task, uh, and they should have control over their journeys, right? So as a bank, we should be available at every point to support the client in their journeys. So, say for example, if a user needs to uh, get a loan from the online banking portal, so they should get all relevant information as quickly, as efficiently as possible. Say, what are the rates? What do we offer versus other banks? Why should they not go to any other bank? How are the services better? What would be the loan structure? What would be the EMIs for a particular loan amount? So all this information has to be readily available for the user, and the user then should be able to complete the process digitally all by themselves, to however extent is possible. uh, right, so that's how designing for a banking platform, banking application, versus any other application is. It's not something where you would want user to spend more time on a platform, but rather to make them, assist them complete their tasks as soon as possible. So ensure that support channels, be it via chats or phones, etc., should be available immediately to assist. So that, I think, is a major difference between a major challenge for designing a banking application. You have to be very aware of your users expectations and needs of being there.
Wow, that's beautifully expressed in terms of the difference between using both these applications for other services as well as banking. In fact, with banking moving to the online arena of fintech companies, there's a considerable expectation from the world of user experience designers to demonstrate the differentiation in the product range itself. My next question to you, Nivedita, is what are some of the exciting changes then that one can witness in the coming times in the digital banking aspect with respect to design?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's this lot of things happening both in India and outside, and I think banking, digital banking, design, and technology, they really have a bright future. So, just for an example, you can say how APIs and open banking are transforming the banking platforms. So in 2018, just a couple of years ago, PSD2 guidelines were introduced in Europe. So PSD2 is a Payment Service Providers Directive. So second version of it was introduced in Europe, and this allowed all the European banks to open their payment services to third party service providers, what we called TPPs. So what it meant was, now we could design applications where the customers could see their account informations from different banks in a single place. So just imagine one platform and you can see your account information from, say, an HDFC, from a Deutsche, from an ICICI, all the different accounts that a customer might be having. And this would mean the user could now have a complete overview of their financial situation, and they can now analyze their financial plans better. Another solution which was now possible was using online banking to make payments to third party merchants from a bank's app, but using any of the client's accounts, right? So whether they belong to this entity or not, they could use the bank's app to make that payment. So basically, before PSD2, all the third party providers had faced a lot of limitations in offering any such solution. And now, because of the technology and the government directives and initiatives available, the scope for innovation is amazing. And I think designing such innovative applications also means that the designer should have a sound understanding of the technologies behind, as I was telling. So only then would we be able to engineer the the experiences and solutions most efficiently. uh, so closer home, if you can just think about UPI. So now we cannot really even imagine our lives without UPI. But UPI was just introduced in 2016, right, by NPCI. So it just kind of revolutionized the payment app technologies and design. And it's been almost 4 years now, and apps like Google Pay and Paytm and Amazon and Phone Pay, they have become such an integral part of our lives. We really cannot imagine payments, and especially in these COVID times, right? It has been even better. So definitely design, technology, uh, I mean, banking is something that is a really great field of innovation and experimentation when it comes to design and technology both.
Absolutely. In fact, we cannot imagine the world without some of these applications today, and they've just become such integral part of our lives and our daily way of behaving. In fact, one interesting thing that you touched upon, and I've been curious to know that there's so much at stake when it comes to fintech. And one of the things that designing a fintech product comes down to is this important word called as trust. For example, would I trust your app enough to put my savings there? Will the transaction get through? All sorts of questions like these. Now, this is a delicate question, which in turn becomes a which in turn lands up becoming a design challenge with ethical implication. The question that I have is, how do designers in fintech space address this dilemma?
Sure. So I think the pointers which I already touched upon about giving user access and control. So those become the basics for designing any banking or fintech application. when it comes to security and the trust factor. uh, so when you're part of the banking industry, there are a number of regulations and limitations that you are supposed to work within. There are controls designed within the bank that every employee of the bank has to follow. So when I mentioned that a job of a designer in a bank is not just designing interfaces, it's a lot more than that in terms of understanding the regulations. When there is a new directive by say RBI, what does it mean for your solution? What what additional features would you be able to expose now? What are the things that you cannot let the users be aware of? So we have to be constantly aware of the guidelines, the controls that apply to your specific businesses, and design within those limitations. I think also the ethical responsibility is to give all the information to the client as clearly and as simply as possible. So whenever we design an interface, of course there are guidelines of say these three different notifications have to be displayed uh, on your website. But as designers, our ethical responsibility is to make sure that they are easily accessible. They are not hidden under layers of navigations just to avoid uh, you know uh, auditors. It shouldn't be just to for the sake of being there. It should be uh, visually placed in a position where the user is easily able to access it and also is able to understand it clearly. If the terminology is a little too technical, there should be additional references just to make sure that the decisions which a user is actually taking on a bank's or a fintech's website is in their interest. So let them have complete control, give them all the information, and also be available. So as a bank or a fintech institution, it becomes all the more important that your support channels are always ready, because this is a decision which might impact the lives of the client. We have to make sure that the support channels are always there to assist and close that journeys. So I think, yeah, that is how we have to make sure we are ethically responsible for all the designs that we display there.
Hey, did you know with assets amounting to approximately 1.3 trillion US dollars, Deutsche Bank was the eighth largest investment bank globally and eighth largest bank in Europe in 2019. It has 2064 branches across the world as on 1st of January 2019, and nearly 1400 of those are in Germany. So, Nivedita, while you spoke about technology, one of the interesting things is the element of touch introduced by the iPhone in 2007, and it revolutionized the way we design. But now the interaction design is evolving even further. Companies are starting to invest in touchless gesture controls. The next natural step is user interface design in the disappearance of the screen itself. And as there will be no screen, the process differs significantly from designing graphical user interfaces. The question that I have for you is, how can designers understand voice communication to create compelling voice user interfaces?
Yeah, sure. So Rohit, to answer your question, as designers, the UX research processes don't change, right? What we do need to understand is which tools and methodologies to use to get the right qualitative data. So when you talk about voice based interfaces, this is a technology which is still evolving. So NLP is something that has fascinated me for a very long time now, and I'm really looking forward to how the next 5-8 years are going to be for this technology. But basically, for designers, what we need to understand is how what are the tools that work best for the research here. So I think the first and the most important step here is to define the persona correctly. Invest some time in defining the right personas basis. uh, the task, the user, the environment profiles. uh, so here, in case of any natural language processing, here the biggest challenge is to define the context. When I'm talking to you, I'll say something and you will obviously understand the hidden the meanings, the by the gestures and by the body language and the hints of maybe other emotions within. But you cannot really expect a voice based interface to understand that. So it's really important to define context there, and personas help exactly to do that. So the designers need to focus on the high priority tasks based on these personas, and then the conversations can be defined around these personas, right? And another important thing here in this aspect is to define the personality of the interface. So when I say personality, you can imagine something like an Alexa who has a personality of her own. Say example, if you're working on a bot for an enterprise user, and what this interface does is gives the user some quick data insights basis their huge data repositories and like thousands of data tables underlying tables, and we need the user to ask something like give me the sales trends for the last 2 weeks in my region. So this is the context which the user would be providing to the interface. In this case, in a case like this, maybe it's good to design a more formal contextual personality, right? Uh, and not really something really fun and quirky there. So the intent should be to clearly provide the required information and then close the conversation, right? And I was just talking about maybe some other interfaces which you could develop on top of, say, a Facebook, a weather bot, for example. So interfaces like that can have a fun personality because the users are not really trying to finish a task, right? And actually, one of the most important steps of designing any voice based interface is the usability testing. So, I would always recommend that during the usability testing phase, use an actual person, deploy an actual person instead of the bot. And then, as part of the texting exercise, the users interact with this person as they would normally. And the UX designer should right and the UX designer would then keenly observe these conversations, make notes, and then they get a very clear understanding of how a typical conversation would go in that particular context. The trick also is to have a limited number of users there, so only maybe 8 to 10 at max, because more than this number can distract the designers to include conversations which are really out of context. So keep the users limited to a maximum of 10 users, and then let the designer observe the conversation, because as I said, context is the key. Understanding the human language and then translating that to an actual command is the key in such a interface. So I think, yeah, that these are the most important things which I would suggest designers should take care of in designing voice based interfaces, and I'm really looking forward to what the future holds for us in this technology.
Interesting, and I'm sure that it's going to be exciting to see how the entire thing evolves. And that brings us, Nivedita, to my last question, and something that I also asked you in the start. At Avantika University, we coined this term called as designeering, which is the base ideology that we follow, the blended approach of design and engineering. You also have operated on the philosophy of blended approach of design engineering as well as business. Now the question is, do you see this to be relevant in your field in the world, and or do you think there's going to be a lot of action around this philosophy in the coming times?
Yes, definitely. So I think that was a term which really interested me in one of our earlier conversations also. So I think it's really important to look at design and engineering together when it comes to designing in technology. As I was mentioning earlier, when we come out of a college as fresh designers, sometimes we are more focused on the aesthetics part of the design, and that definitely is important. But in my experience, when it comes to technology design, most of the products that I have worked with, the final aesthetics part of the visual design was less of a priority. And the reason being, the users that we were targeting were very niche, specific set of users. So in that case, we need to understand the technology, the engineering that goes behind creating that product. And only when the designers work together with the engineers to understand these concepts, only then we can actually create some really functional designs. So as I told you, right, for banking technologies which have recently emerged in fields of open banking, and a lot of payment based innovation which has happened, uh, it is an outcome of a combined effort of design and engineering. Because of course the final product which goes out to the user, uh, the whole idea is to let them use technology in a way that really improves their lives. And that's what we have been doing with the new technologies in banking. So I think that that's definitely a good way to think about it. That's something that all the designers working for technology products should definitely be aware of.
Wow, that's been quite some interesting conversation with you, Nivedita, and I'm sure that the entire world of fintech, as we move forward, we will see a very interesting evolution, and it will be amazing to see how the world of design blends along with this evolution. Thank you so much for joining us on our show. It was a pleasure hosting you today.
Thank you so much, Rohit. It was really an amazing experience talking to you guys, and some really interesting questions that you have come up with. Thanks so much for making me part of this conversation.
Hey there, we hope you enjoyed our show. Do write to us on ads@avantika.edu.in. We look forward to your opinions, feedbacks, and suggestions of speakers you would like us to host on this show. Do tune in our channel next week on Wednesday for a new story on Hubhopper or wherever you get your podcast from. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter.